Smoke rose into the dark sky, filling the air with ash and the smell of burning metal. The battlefield was silent now except for the distant crack of gunfire and the cries of the wounded. The ground was torn apart by explosions. Broken vehicles lay twisted, and bodies were scattered under the ruined buildings. Among the ruins walked a human soldier named Daniel, his uniform torn, his face dirty with blood and dust. He moved carefully, scanning the area, searching for any sign of life. As he stepped over the rubble, a faint sound reached his ears. It was not the growl of enemy machines or the whistle of bullets. It was a weak, trembling cry. Daniel stopped and listened again. The sound came from behind a collapsed wall. He rushed forward, pushing away heavy stones with his bare hands. His heart pounded as the cry grew louder. Finally, under the broken concrete, he found her. It was an alien girl, no older than a teenager. Her skin was pale blue, glowing faintly, even under the dirt and blood. Her long silver hair was tangled, and her body was covered in wounds. She tried to move, but her legs were trapped under the rubble. Her large, bright eyes were filled with pain and fear. When she saw the human soldier, she flinched, as if expecting death. Daniel dropped his weapon to show he meant no harm. "Easy," he whispered, though he knew she might not understand his words. He pressed his shoulder against the stone, straining with all his strength. After a painful effort, he managed to push the rubble aside and free her legs. She cried out in pain, clutching at the ground, but at least she was alive. He lifted her carefully into his arms. She was light, far lighter than he expected, as if she had not eaten in days. Her head rested weakly against his chest, her breath shallow. For a moment, Daniel wondered why he was doing this. She was not human. She belonged to a race man. I considered the enemy. Yet when he looked at her broken body, he could not leave her behind. Carrying her, he began to move through the ruins, but the battlefield was not safe. Shadows moved among the wreckage. Enemy patrols were still searching, their sharp voices echoing in the distance. Daniel crouched low, pressing his back against a wall as two figures passed by. He held the girl close, her faint glowing skin threatening to give them away. Only when the soldiers were gone did he continue. Every step was heavy, every corner dangerous. His muscles ached from carrying her, but he refused to stop. At one point, she opened her eyes and looked at him. Fear slowly faded, replaced by something softer, confusion, maybe even trust. She tried to speak, but only a whisper came out, too weak for him to understand. The forest edge was close now. If he could reach the trees, they might have a chance. Behind him, the sound of engines grew louder, and he knew the enemy was sweeping the area. He pushed himself harder, crashing into the cover of the forest just as searchlights lit up the battlefield. Daniel lowered himself behind a tree, breathing hard, the alien girl still in his arms. Her life now depended on him, a stranger she had never known. He did not realize it yet, but this rescue would change his destiny forever. The forest was dark and heavy with silence. Tall trees blocked the moonlight, and the sound of engines faded into the distance. Daniel moved deeper between the trunks, carrying the wounded alien girl. His arms trembled from exhaustion, but he refused to let her go. Every step reminded him of the danger. Patrols could still be hunting them. Yet the forest also felt like a thin shield, a fragile wall between them and death. Finally, after what felt like hours, Daniel found a hollow under the roots of a fallen tree. It was small, but it offered cover from the cold night wind. He laid the girl gently on the ground, pulling off his jacket to place beneath her. She stirred, her glowing skin dim in the shadows. Her eyes opened slightly, watching him with caution. Daniel sat back, catching his breath. He knew she needed treatment, but his medical supplies were little more than a bandage and a half-empty water bottle. He cleaned the blood from her arm with careful hands, wrapping it as best as he could. She winced at the touch, her lips parting as though she wanted to speak, but no words came out. He offered her the water. She hesitated, staring at the bottle, then at him. For a moment, it seemed she would refuse, but thirst overcame fear. She drank slowly, her hands trembling as she held the container. Daniel watched, realizing how fragile she looked, her body too thin, her strength almost gone. Hours passed. Daniel stayed awake, listening to the forest. He could not sleep. The enemy could return at any time. The girl shifted restlessly, her breath uneven. Once she coughed weakly, and he placed a hand on her shoulder to calm her. She looked at him, her glowing eyes reflecting the faint firelight he had dared to make. Their gazes met for longer this time. She still seemed afraid, but less than before. Slowly she raised one hand, touching her chest. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice barely audible but clear enough. Daniel understood. It was her name. He pointed to himself. "Daniel." Something changed in that moment. A bridge began to form between them. She repeated his name, her accent soft, broken, but the effort made him smile. The sound of snapping branches grew louder, each step echoing through the silent forest. Daniel crouched low, pulling Lyra close behind the trunk of a massive oak. His grip tightened on the small weapon he carried, though he knew it would not be enough against a full patrol. His heart pounded in his chest. Through the shadows he saw them. A group of soldiers, armored and armed, their helmets glowing faintly as they scanned the trees. They were not human soldiers. These were alien trackers, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark armor that shimmered in the sunlight breaking through the leaves. Their voices hissed in Lyra's language, sharp and commanding. Lyra's body trembled as she heard them. Her lips moved silently, whispering a prayer or maybe a warning. Daniel leaned closer, whispering, "Quiet." She nodded, clutching his sleeve as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. The soldiers spread out, their scanners sweeping across the forest floor. One beam of red light passed dangerously close to Daniel's hiding place. He held his breath, pulling Lyra tighter into the shadows. The tracker paused, sniffing the air as though he could sense them. For a moment, Daniel thought it was over, but then the soldier moved on, unaware of how close his prey had been. The river carried them far, tossing Daniel and Lyra like leaves in a storm. Daniel clutched her tightly, fighting against the freezing current. His body ached, lungs burning as he gasped for air. At last, the river threw them against the muddy bank. He dragged them both out, collapsing on the shore. For a long moment he lay there, chest rising and falling, the weight of exhaustion crushing him. Beside him, Lyra coughed weakly, water spilling from her lips. Her pale blue skin glimmered faintly under the fading light of dusk. Daniel pulled himself upright, brushing her tangled silver hair from her face. She was alive, but barely. They needed shelter. Gathering the last of his strength, Daniel carried her into the cover of the nearby rocks, finding a shallow cave. He set her down carefully, lighting a small fire with the few matches he had left. The warmth slowly filled the cold air. For a long while, silence ruled the cave. Lyra stared at the flames, her face pale, but her eyes thoughtful. Daniel cleaned her wounds again, rewrapping the bandages with strips torn from his uniform. She watched him with a look he could not read. Fear was still there, but also something else. Hesitation, as though she was deciding whether to speak. Finally, her lips parted. "You must know," she whispered. Her voice was soft, broken by exhaustion. Daniel leaned closer, frowning. "Know what?" She placed her trembling hand over her chest. Not just girl. My blood. It cursed. For them." Daniel shook his head. "Cursed? What do you mean?" Lyra's glowing eyes met his. For the first time he saw not just pain but deep sorrow. She spoke slowly, searching for words. "My people, we have gifts. Some heal. Some strong. My bloodline, rare. Too rare. Enemies fear it, so they hunt me. If they take me, they kill. If they fail, they burn all." Her voice cracked and she looked away. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Even my own people left me. Too dangerous. Too much risk." Daniel's chest tightened. He realized then why the soldiers chased her so fiercely. She was not only an innocent girl, she was a key, maybe even a threat to entire armies. He looked at her, fragile and broken in the firelight, and wondered how anyone could see her as a danger. "You're just a child," he said quietly. "You didn't ask for this." Her gaze lifted, sharp but trembling. "Child? No, future. They see me as weapon." The morning sun broke through the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Daniel tightened the straps on his gear, every muscle sore from carrying Lyra for days. He had slept only in fragments, but his mind was sharp. The enemy was closing in. He could feel it. Lyra stood near the cave entrance, leaning weakly against the rocks. Her wounds were healing slowly, but she was still too fragile to fight or run on her own. Her glowing eyes followed Daniel's movements with silent fear. "They're coming," he said, his voice low but steady. She nodded. She did not need to ask how he knew. The forest had grown too quiet. Birds had fled, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Daniel began preparing the ground around the cave. He dug shallow pits, placed sharpened sticks, and stretched thin wires from his kit. They were crude traps, but enough to slow the enemy. Lyra watched him in silence, her face pale. Finally, she spoke. "You stay? Fight? Too many." Daniel paused, looking at her. "If we keep running, they'll catch us. Here I can make them bleed, I can buy us time." She shook her head weakly. "You die." Daniel forced a thin smile. "Then I'll make sure I take as many of them with me as I can." Her lips trembled. She wanted to argue, but she had no strength left. Instead, she whispered something in her own tongue, a soft prayer carried by the wind. The cave was filled with smoke, dust, and the sharp smell of burned metal. Daniel's ears rang from the blasts, his body weak from blood loss. The floor was littered with broken armor and lifeless figures. The fight had been brutal, but somehow, against all odds, he and Lyra had survived. Daniel leaned against the cave wall, struggling to stay upright. His knife was still in his hand, its blade chipped and red. He could barely lift his arm, but his eyes stayed locked on the entrance, ready for another attack. Silence. Only the crackle of the dying fire and the shallow breathing of the alien girl filled the cave. Slowly, Daniel dropped the knife and staggered to Lyra's side. She lay against the rocks, her glowing skin dim, her chest rising unevenly. She had pushed herself far beyond her strength. "Stay with me," Daniel whispered, pressing his hand against her forehead. Her skin was hot, her body trembling. "Don't give up now." Her eyes opened slightly, faint light flickering in them. "We lived," she whispered. Daniel gave a tired smile. "Barely." Years passed after the day Daniel carried the wounded alien girl from the battlefield. What began in blood and fire had slowly turned into something no one could have predicted. The hidden village where they found safety grew into a home. Daniel was no longer a stranger there. At first, the villagers had distrusted him. Many whispered that a human soldier would never protect one of their own. But time changed them. They saw how he stood by Lyra, how he hunted for food, built shelter, and never abandoned her. Gradually, the whispers faded. Lyra herself changed even more. The fragile, frightened girl who had once trembled in his arms grew into a strong young woman. Her glowing skin no longer dimmed with fear, but shone with quiet strength. Her voice, once broken and uncertain, became firm. She was no longer running, she was living. And Daniel, who once thought he would die nameless on a battlefield, had found something he thought lost forever: purpose.